2025 has been all AI this and AI that. My phone, my laptop, my search engine, the blimmin' Word document I'm writing this on right now, all want me to try their AI features. Social media is saturated with it, it's in the news, and adverts abound with AI solutions to problems that I don't have. So, it's New Year's Eve, and I'm going to sit out the flipping of the calendar in good old AR, actual reality, out in the woods, away from the robots. Will 2026 be the year the AI bubble bursts, or will it be the year that we're all drowned under a tsunami of generative slop? Well, I'm here to wade in with my unsolicited opinion. I hope to convince you that a large language model like Chat GTP, its GPT, will never produce anything of any importance, value, or interest whatsoever. Welcome back to the Dartmoor Podcast. Here's how I understand it. AI isn't actually AI. Now, I know that it's rich that someone with a podcast that isn't a podcast is complaining about inaccurate nomenclature, but I feel we're being missold. There is no intelligence involved in these large language models. They are just complicated guess the next word machines, basically a tarted up version of predictive text. As such, they don't understand anything, they don't aspire to anything, they don't dream of electric sheep. They just guess the most probable next word in a sentence. It's a magic trick, an illusion. And because of this, our anthropomorphised computer chums are incapable of doing anything, well, good. Now, I'm sure AI might be useful for something, for sifting through loads of data or doing big hard sums or some other menial time-consuming task. But it's when its supporters claim that it can encroach upon the world of the arts, that is where I begin to have a problem. So, today, on the cusp of 2026, I've set up a little experiment to see who can do it better. Man or machine. George or Chat GTP.
It's GPT.
It's Garry Kasparov versus Deep Blue, except on Dartmoor in a parka. And that this time the machines are going to take a pasting. It'll be like the end of Blade Runner. I'm Harrison Ford, obviously. And we'll be slipping around up on heart and chest, and the AI will just be shutting down in the rain like Rutger Hauer. Except its final speech would be shit. What form shall this contest take? Well, there's only one thing I feel qualified enough to judge it on, and that's its writing. I can write a bit, I'm writing this, and as an English teacher I have a lot of experience scrutinising writing, whether that be analysing great literature or just marking terrible essays. This will be a writing competition, so in fairness to Chat GTP, I am very much taking on the robots on my home turf. Here are the rules of engagement. I've chosen a fairly generic topic related to Dartmoor, rain, and we'll film 2 3-minute not-a-podcasts about it to be compared side by side. One written by Chat GPT,
It's GT...
and one written by me, George TDP. I've got a load of unused footage of me getting soaked from a Christmas episode that I can use as rainy B-roll, and I'll genuinely do my best job narrating and editing both versions. The only thing different will be the script. And to make things even fairer, I actually already have a 3-minute script on rain that I recorded for the BBC last year. I get a 3-minute recording played on BBC Radio Devon on a Sunday lunchtime. I expect when Toby Buckland needs a wee. I've changed it a little bit to move it from an audio to a visual medium and added a bit of whimsical weirdness that the Beeb might not approve of, but it's essentially the same, and most importantly it was written without my man versus machine experiment in mind. And to give the Chat TGP a bit of a head start too, I prompted it to add an original simile, a bit of humour and a pop culture reference, the sorts of things you'd find in an episode of the Dartmoor Podcast. Right, to pass George in the rain, see if you can work out whose version this first one is.
I am not looking forward to leaving this tent this morning.
Right then, welcome back to the Dartmoor Podcast, which as ever is not actually a podcast, but a sequence of ramblings recorded somewhere between a soggy tussock and a granite outcrop. Today's topic, rain. Dartmoor rain. The proper stuff. The kind that doesn't fall so much as drift sideways with intent. I checked the weather forecast this morning and it said 50% chance of rain, which on Dartmoor translates to 100% chance of rain plus emotional damage. I'm currently sheltering, and I use that word loosely, behind a clump of gorse, which in the catalogue of questionable life choices sits somewhere between "let's climb a tor in December" and "let's touch that rock, it probably isn't adders." The rain is what we on Dartmoor call fine, which means it's actually terrible. It's mist, but wetter. A cloud with ambition. You see, rain on Dartmoor has personality. Somewhere like Surrey gets showers, Dartmoor gets weather with opinions. Sometimes it arrives as a soft, apologetic drizzle, as if the moor is just clearing its throat. Other times it's a full theatrical production, wind howling across the slopes, ponies braced like disgruntled philosophers, and me trying to convince myself that waterproof trousers actually work. I passed a pony earlier who gave me a look that said very clearly, "You chose to come out in this. Don't involve me." But here's the thing. Dartmoor in the rain is, well, magical. The kind of magic that doesn't sparkle but sighs. The granite darkens to this deep, ancient grey like it's remembering something old and important. The streams wake up and slither between the boulders like a determined ferret with a map. And the moss becomes the true ruler of the land, luminous and impossibly green, as if someone turned the saturation up to enchanted forest. Rain changes the moor's acoustics too. Sound gets muffled, swallowed, held close. You can hear the patter against your hood, the soft hiss across the heather, and occasionally the distant forlorn bleat of a sheep who, frankly, should have made better life choices. The same sheep, I assume, that's been following me all morning. At this point I feel like I'm in Jurassic Park, but instead of velociraptors, I'm being hunted down by an especially determined Dartmoor ewe. And, of course, Dartmoor folklore has plenty to say about rain. According to some old tales, the mist is the breath of the moor itself, a sign that it's watching. Other stories claim the drifting drizzle hides spirits wandering the ancient tracks. Personally, I think the spirits are probably just looking for a dry pub like the rest of us. So, if you ever find yourself out here in weather like this, which you will whether you plan to or not, don't rush back to the car. Slow down. Let the rain bead on your jacket. Watch the way the moor softens, grows quieter, more secretive. Dartmoor doesn't reveal itself all at once. It chooses its moments, and some of its best ones happen in the rain. Right, my gorse shelter is starting to drip directly down the back of my neck, so I'm going to call it a day. Thanks for joining me in this extremely damp episode. Until next time, stay warm, stay curious, and remember, on Dartmoor there's no such thing as bad weather, only varying flavours of wet. Okay, that was, I hope, quite obviously Chat PG tips. And before we take a look at how it should be done, and before I pick apart any specifically terrible lines, let's just have a quick think about how awful that was in general. What did it tell us? Nothing. It's vapid, surprisingly so. The first half was just finding different ways of stating the obvious, that Dartmoor rain can be pretty intense at times, and then it concluded by saying that Dartmoor was actually beautiful in the rain, which isn't true. Anyone who's been caught out there with proper filth coming in will tell you it's grim, a genuinely, objectively unpleasant experience. Anyway, before I get carried away, let's plunge ourselves back into that misery. Take 2. Once more with feelings.
I am not looking forward to leaving this tent this morning.
Ask most people for a single word to describe Dartmoor and they'll say wet. And that's perhaps even more true than they realise. The moor has an astonishing average of almost 200 days in the year where there's some sort of downpour. Amazingly, this profoundly cold phenomenon begins in the tropics. A foment of warm, wet air amasses in the Gulf of Mexico, then rolls and broils over 4,000 miles of the wide and wild Atlantic, picking up steam as it goes. When that air finally clears that vast expanse of water and roars over the tip of Land's End, it has gorged itself on the foam of the sea, wave upon wave of towering clouds swollen with the weight of the ocean and looking for a rock on which to break. And that rock is Dartmoor. The Gulf Stream is forced upwards over the cold, high granite where it cools, condenses and pours down on the unfortunate soggy sheep and any wild campers silly enough to have ventured up here. Welcome back to the Dartmoor Podcast. Dartmoor is a land of water. Almost all of Devon's major rivers begin their lives here. The Dart, the Tean, the Tavy, the Plym, Avon and Bovey. And what beautiful rivers they are. Not the sluggish, cloudy, turgid waters of the lowlands, but sparkling, leaping, flashing torrents that crash over smooth boulders and carve their silver way through the moor's deep valleys. And the water is deliciously clear too. Although it's stained a deep orange by the peat, it's never muddy or opaque. The colour always makes me think of Coca-Cola fizzing and foaming its way down towards the sea. Just thinking about it makes me long for the return of those hot summer afternoons where you can leap in and cool off after a long hike. It seems a long way off on a day like today. But, and I accept this is little consolation for past George, it is just days like today that make those summer swims possible. Because Dartmoor, you see, has a brilliant way to ensure the streams keep flowing even in the harshest of droughts. The moor's notorious bogs and mires are formed by an amazing plant called sphagnum moss that thrives here in the soggy acidic conditions that most other plants hate. This lurid green plant can hold 10 times its own weight in water, so where it spreads in great soft carpets, it forms a giant sponge, soaking up all that rain and releasing it slowly throughout the year. This not only keeps the rivers topped up in a dry spell, but prevents serious flooding in times like these. Well, almost. And, better still, that sphagnum moss actually filters the rain, giving us Devonians cleaner drinking water than most. So, although I might be cursing my damp socks on a day like today, Dartmoor's seemingly ceaseless rain gives us a lot to be thankful for. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time. That was much better, if I may say so myself. It's informative and true, importantly. One of the big problems everyone seems to encounter with these LLMs is that they make stuff up. Remember that bit from the AI script? According to some old tales, the mist is the breath of the moor itself, a sign that it's watching. And other stories claim the drifting drizzle hides spirits wandering the ancient tracks. Well, when I asked it which old tales it meant, Chat Chippie, at the risk of anthropomorphising here, went all coy and admitted that it had just been, in its own words, invented for mood. That means it's more interested in something sounding good than being correct. Which might be okay if it did sound good, but it doesn't. I describe its tone as that of an enthusiastic but essentially untalented GCSE student. It writes at a solid GCSE grade 6, something like a B- in old money, but it can never surprise or delight. This is a direct result of it being a copying machine, predicting the next word based on reading millions of examples. By its very process, it cannot, and will not ever, come up with something original. And this is never more apparent than in its appalling attempts at humour. Randomly saying velociraptor does not a pop culture reference make, and whatever that ending about different flavours of wet is meant to mean, I have no idea. Let's touch that rock, it probably isn't adders, actually is kind of funny, but only because it's so nonsensically deranged. AI genuinely cannot grasp what makes something humorous. It doesn't understand irony, and it really can't do metaphor either. Rivers are like a determined ferret with a map, apparently. Lose the map and you might get away with it, but it's still a pretty weak simile. Compare that to the Coca-Cola fizzing and foaming its way down towards the sea from my attempts. Dartmoor rivers in the sun really do look like Coca-Cola, but you haven't thought that before, so it makes you smile and see in your mind's eye a Dartmoor river again, as if for the first time. And unlike that random ferret, it's tonally cohesive too, a joyous, sweet, silly, sensory image that fits with the delight of longing to jump in on a hot summer's day. When the image first bubbled into my mind, it struck me and I instinctively knew that other people would connect with it too. I think there's something in both the writing and reception of a good metaphor that requires an instinctive shared notion of something, and that's a very human trait that an LLM will never be able to bridge. And how about that list of river names? A simple rhetorical trick that Chat Chippie Tea could easily have used. The Dart, the Tean, the Tavy, the Plym, Avon and Bovey. And maybe you could train it to recognise pleasing rhythms and rhymes and mouth sounds somehow. But it would never have seen how irresistibly beautiful those river names were, so would never have known to use them. Now, some of you might be thinking, OK George, you've made your point, but if AI is so terrible, why are you so bothered about it? Stop punching down at those poor defenceless little clankers. And I've been wondering that myself quite a bit. Why does this enrage me so much? And after a bit of introspection, I've come to a conclusion. I think it's because I'm scared. Not scared it'll produce something to match me, I'm far too arrogant for that, and think I proved my eternal superiority when I tore apart the rules of the English language to use the word foment as a noun in my Gulfstream monologue. No, I'm not scared it can write like me. No, it's much worse than that. I'm scared that it's just good enough for just about the majority of people. Making an episode of the Dartmoor Podcast takes weeks. In that time, thousands of lazy AI content creators can produce millions of episodes of billions of minutes of B- sludge. And among it would be plenty of things to tickle the algorithm, to clickbait the unsuspecting and draw in the credulous. Send that into hyperdrive by having bots watch and comment on the videos and then reply to one another in a useless eternal tinny echo, then the humans get harder and harder to find. I feel like I've slightly self-aggrandised myself in this episode, and I hope people realise that I'm putting on a bit of a character here. I'm not saying that my writing's great. I'm not. That's not the point. The point I'm trying to make is that something made by people at least has the potential to be great. At least. An AI can only be mediocre, and yet swamp us in its proliferation. The image of AI sludge is a good one. Like a lake which has been so filled with washed-off sewage and cow shit that it blooms in billows of green slime that block out all light and suffocate all life. How can we resist this digital eutrophication process? Well, it seems to me that we can fight back by simply rejecting the generative and re-embracing the real. As I've shown today, this stuff can't do art. So seek out those hidden pools it cannot reach, and revel in novels and poetry and paintings and podcasts and not podcasts. Things with meaning and purpose and originality. Demand more from your internet content, or else everything of value on here will be swept away. All these things we've seen, things people wouldn't believe. Ponies stampeding through the bluebells on a June afternoon. The sky on fire off the shoulder of Great Miss Tor. Ring ouzels flickering by Hemsworthy Gate. All these moments will be lost, like tears in rain. Now that's how you do a pop culture reference. Thanks for watching, everyone. I wouldn't normally say this, but if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so that you can still find the real me in the AI swamp by the end of 2026. Happy New Year, humans. See you next time.